It may not seem like it, but I have my head at an absolutely ridiculous angle right now. One moment. Well, there we go. There I am. Hi. Oh, actually, wait, no, I'm gonna move this to over there. There we go. I know what I'm doing. I'm a streamer who's been doing this for nearly 5 years. This is fine. Hi. Hello, hello Trematol, hello Hugs, hello Circuit, hello. Good evening. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Nice coffee, Jess. Thank you. I do admit I normally don't actually like pre-listen to any of the mixes I play in the background of these streams. One day one of them's gonna have like a bloody screamer in the middle and it's gonna like destroy me instantly. Here for the start. I mean, it's good to see you at the start rather than about 2 minutes before I start thinking about finishing stream. Hi, I hope we're all doing well. What have I been doing? Oh yeah, I didn't stream on Monday because I had my singing lesson. Went really well, but oh my god, yesterday I must have started sleeping and fallen asleep 4 separate occasions yesterday. It was not a very pleasant experience because I had a really like the full sleep, melatonin powered sleep. I had a horrible nightmare and there were gangs and guns and stuff going on at this. It was a lot. Woke up from a nightmare, was like, oh god, okay, well that's unpleasant. Anyway, I've got about like 2 hours before I need to leave for my singing lesson, so I'll just like chill for a bit, and I fell back asleep. Fortunately, I set 10,000 alarms, so, you know. So yeah, I woke up again, then with about 30 minutes left before I had to leave for my singing lesson, so instead, like, panic, had to leave the house. And when I got back home, for some reason, I just kept on having to take naps. Very disorientating. I'm not an actual cat. The question mark is very important to me. I do not like falling asleep and waking up repeatedly. No. Listen, I love, Nikushi, like, I love all of, like, Higurashi. I believe it's probably really well made, well written, well everything, but I'm not touching Silent Hill off. It's not happening. I had to, right, after watching Numbers play No, I'm Not a Human, I couldn't sleep until about 10:30 in the morning. That was probably about 5.5 hours after I left Numbers stream, because I just couldn't stop thinking about that fucking visitor. Sorry, I shouldn't use swear words, especially not on YouTube. They'll kill me. No, it wasn't that it was horror. It wasn't that it was, it was. So, it was the kind of horror that I do like. Like, it's psychological, there's no jump scares, it's just horror. But, the writing of it had me questioning... Yeah, I didn't even play it myself. You alone? So the writing of it, for some reason, drove my brain in circles. Like, going into, like, how much can we can you trust the symptoms that they're saying? Like, what is the real reason behind of it? Like, what's like the truth? What's down the rabbit hole? Here's the thing, though. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's the thing. That my brain really fixated on it for some reason. The social deception. Yeah. Surprise, surprise, I'm weak to social deception. Let's go. So, reading the wiki and reading the very, like, logical, like, these are just game mechanics, and actually, like, some things are not even really, like, explained, because it's just a video game, and it's like, some things don't actually matter, it got me, like, calmed down. But I was just so... The writing is brilliant. The writing is brilliant. Very compelling. I literally couldn't... I would be like, okay, I'm not going to watch Numbers. The Numbers is just going to be like, on another browser. I'm not going to pay attention. But I just kept on. Like, I just couldn't stop myself from being like, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? So yeah, I mean, brilliant. Wouldn't play it. But yeah, it did torment me for a little bit. It tormented me in that special way that psychological horror hits me really hard. Like the part where they eat at the end. See, I went to sleep before the end of Numbers stream, so I didn't see what ending they got. And I picked up the game, I did one whole session for all 10 endings. It really hooked me. Yeah. I'm still a little bit like, oh, what is the deal with Fema? What is, like, all of the mechanics behind the visitors and the truth behind the sun? But it's not real life. It's not real life. Some things are mysteries. It's fine. Hi, Numbers. I'm sorry they ate you. I mean, is that better or worse than becoming a visitor? I guess you're not human anyway, so it wouldn't really matter for you to become or still not human. Hi, Barry. But yeah, so I'm Not a Human it hit a very vulnerable part of my brain. If it wasn't for hitting that very, very, like, vulnerable part of my brain, like, I would play it because it didn't have jump scares. But because it specifically, like, hinges on that social stuff, it's bad. It's bad for me. It's bad for me. I have to recognize when my brain is not quite equipped to deal with certain things. Can't believe Numbers didn't die. Well, that's because Numbers kept on feeding the cat every 5 seconds. To be honest, I'm surprised the cat didn't run out of lives, unless the cat did run out of lives. But the way the Numbers was feeding that cat... the way Numbers was feeding that cat was like, fatten up now! Yeah, I can't believe how many times that cat saved you. But yeah, no. Credits to the game makers. I will tell you another game that I've been looking at that is actually in a horror vein. Numbers, I think you might have played it, but I didn't actually watch you play it. I like came into a stream, looked for a bit and then left. It's that hotline one. Home safety hotline? Is it or something? Hotline. Yeah, home safety hotline. But I don't know if that does have jump scares. Here's the two things from any horror game that I want to play. If it has needles in, I won't play it. Like, full stop. If it has needles, like, I'm not even gonna touch it. Jump scares are bad for me, but every once in a while I will tolerate them. But I will have a heart attack because, you know. But yeah, I don't know if Home Safety Hotline. I thought you meant Hotline Miami for a second. That's a complete. Is that even a horror game? Isn't that like a top-down? No, that's not horror, is it? Is it? I don't have it. I've never played Hotline Miami. I just know that people have like animal masks. Have you read through the SCP wiki before? I've read some. I've read some of the articles on the SCP wiki. Mostly like some of the famous ones, like some of the real like well-known ones, but then also just like random ones. I used to read actually a lot of like creepypasta stuff. The only one I still really remember anything about is some kind of like abandoned Mickey Mouse fairground something, I don't know. It's so many, like, I was so into all that stuff when I was a teenager. They added more abilities to Overwatch. I can't do that. Haha. Oh. See, specifically games that they're trying to gatekeep me. They're gatekeeping me and it's working. Don't gatekeep me. It has elements of psychological horror. The only one I remember is the Morrowind Look to the Skies one from like a decade ago. Yeah, I've read some of the popular SCPs. Like obviously Shy Guy is one of them. I've watched videos about a decent chunk of SCPs as well. There's some guy who makes like the videos with that very tech company art style, and they would always get recommended to me back when I had Facebook on my phone, and I'd just be like, yeah, screw it. I'm just laying in bed, I got nothing else to do. I'll just watch this. I've never read any of the I don't know what the deal is with Jeff the Killer. Don't know what his deal is. I don't think I really know Smile Dog. Who are the other really popular ones? I was really into Slenderman to a dangerous degree for my health. I was into everything Slenderman related, anything even tangentially related. Even like I followed Marble Hornets like religiously. I did my very first game stream, not as Purity, I mean like my very first game stream. Was it literally on livestream.com? It might have been on livestream.com or something like that. Was Slender the 7 Pages. find my 7 pages. I think I managed to get 3 or 4 before I got so scared I just kind of like stared into a fence on the edge of the map and was like, I can't do this anymore. It was one of those crazy... it depends on your definition of crazy Slenderman girls, but I mean, I guess. The problem is, let me be a bit vulnerable in this moment. And I apologize if this changes your perception of me. I was straight up convinced, like, that Slenderman was real, and I would hallucinate, like, seeing Slenderman, like, both outside, like, outside windows and stuff, like, on buses, like, driving through places, I would, like, see him around corners and stuff, and, like, when I was trying to sleep in the darkness of my room, I would, like, see, like, the hand and the tendrils, like, reaching over. It affected me quite seriously. It affected me quite severely. Slenderman is real? Fuck. Remember you bringing... Yeah, I have mentioned it before. I will say I was really stressed at the time. I did not have a very good time when I was in school, and it caused me to be a little bit, prone to... My brain just tried to create ways to protect myself. And unfortunately that was one of them. But it's fine. It's fine now. Slenderman is a manifestation of academic stress. True, real, actual. What if someone invented a hollow felting needle? I don't like the sound of that very much. No, I don't like the sound of that. Why? Why would someone... But yeah, that's... I loved horror very much growing up. And it's not that I don't like horror. I still have people who tell me, I know that none of you have, like, ever seen my writing ever. But I don't know if you can tell, like, just from the stuff I have with, like, purity into hell and the backstory with, like, corruption and stuff. Like, there is, like, a constant vibe of, like, horror stuff in a lot of stuff I do. And people who talk about my writing tell me they like the horror aspects of my writing. But it's a different kind of horror than I guess a lot of video games are. Felting needles are evil. It doesn't affect purity because it's not hollow. So wait. Oh, are you doing felting and you're just like stabbing yourself like loads with the felting needle? Imagine you're writing about 90% detailed descriptions of people being dismembered. No! That's so rude! That is so rude. Hold on, I'm gonna go find a comment that someone made on my writing right now. Purely just so I can, like... Purely so I can... No. Let me find... It's not the most recent piece of writing I've done, but... Sorry. I'm Google's comment verbatim. I don't think it'd be findable like that. I'm not going to actually quote it word for word. I'm just gonna generally say what it said once I freaking find it. There it is. Show on dashboard. Say the word verb. No, I'm not saying it again. Yeah, here we go. It was verbatim. Verbatim? Oh, that does sound more right, actually. That does sound more right. But it just makes sense for it to be verbatim. Okay, hold on. Okay, this might be another British thing. This might be another No, this is not a British thing. This is just me not knowing how to talk.
Verbatim.
Verbatim. I'm saying it my way. I don't care. I like that better. Anyway, yeah, no. So the comments on my rating, love the descriptions. You can almost feel how disorientating and overstimulating it is, and the way that it gets cemented into the character's brain. I'm like, yay! 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 It was supposed to be like overwhelming. That was the atmosphere. I did it. I can write a little bit. A little bit. It's toxic yaoi? No. You. No. Aren't you technically published? I mean, kind of, yes. And it's in a big compilation. Like, it's just like one of the. It was. Sort of, but I don't know if I count it. Sort of. I don't think you can buy it anywhere though. Your writing was so hard to so cute! Damn mean. No. There's a joke. No, don't worry, don't worry. I did not think that was it was your actual interpretation of what they said. Yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of criticisms about my own writing. Especially recently. I've been reading a lot of my old writing and I'm like, wow, my writing hasn't changed for like 8 years. That's bad. My writing should have improved in 8 years, but whatever, it's fine. Anyway, this is when will you share with the class? Okay, listen. The problem is, I can't share my writing. No one's going to... Even the people who have read Homestuck won't get it, because, like, there's... It's so far divorced from... the source material that you can barely even relate it to the source material. To the point that I don't call it fanfiction, because it's not fanfiction, because it's got absolutely nothing to do with the original at all. I just stole their planet, that's all. How else will you improve that? I mean, people do start me. People do read my writing. I do post my writing. How do you think I got the comments about my descriptions? Is there a good starting point, or is it start from when you were like 12? See, the problem is it's not one continuous storyline. I have over 100 OCs that all exist in the same universe and all kind of... They overlap, but don't necessarily have anything to do with each other half the time. I have like a handful of different like cities and settings, and some people are related, but still haven't met each other, ever. And then you also just need the backdrop of how... I think I have about 150 OCs. We're building good, plot bad. I love making characters. I love making characters and giving them problems. That's my favourite. My most recent character is former military, involved in planet invasion, and was missing in action for about 3 months before they found them buried, and somehow still alive. And I'm like, Don't worry about how they're still alive. It's definitely nothing to do with any kind of alien parasite. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Searching up all these tags right now. On what? Where are you searching? Where are you searching? I'm talking very intentionally and in more vague ways. Last time I know, I was like, man, should I be saying this stuff? I've spent a decent amount of time since then thinking about, like, what can I and can't I say? Because here's the thing, I love talking about my OCs. And I'm also very shy talking about my OCs, especially to people who don't ask. So the fact that you Mega Man, you're not gonna find anything on there. You said he was missing for 3 months, but trolls canonically don't measure time in months. I said he was invading another planet. It was an invasion of another planet in... it was a frontier world, so it might not even necessarily be the same galaxy. But they could measure months there. I know Alternia measures time in Perigese. Teasing chat with OCs and never revealing the story. That's because there just isn't like one solid story, that's the thing, right? Each character has their own life, their own story. So there isn't like one overarching, like, this is what happens. It's just people's lives. It's just people's lives. The planet just so happened to have months. Why do you think I should have made up a new word for months specifically for this alien planet? You should make one new OC specifically that you can share with us. I have thought about it. There was sorry, that made me laugh. That caught me off guard. I can't laugh too loud, why? Okay. Sorry, there's something just about the wording of that caught me completely. Okay, what I mean is, what the hell was I saying? Yeah, so I did start working on an OC that I could use as Puri, but here's the thing, like, so I kind of did, apart from it's completely unrelated to all my other stuff. It was actually to do with something that Havoc was working on, but I don't know if Havoc has even touched that in like a year. I don't know. I think it'd be tough to have like an actual OC that's kind of related to all my other stuff as Puri. Sorry, I read it. In my defense, I don't know if there's that much. Most of my characters don't know each other, so I don't know if they have that much unresolved tension. There's definitely some though. I can literally think of 2 of my characters that do. Anyway, this isn't about my writing. It's not. It is not smut. I don't write that stuff. I do not write it. I'm not gonna say that it's not something that's so, like, not my characters aren't all ROAs. That would be stupid. that would be ridiculous. But anything that does happen in regards to that is unwritten, implied, behind the curtain, fade to black. I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about that. You guys are all getting caught by the YouTube blocking. Oh no, I don't hate on smut writers. Some people in the communities I've been in have been the most greatest writers that I've ever known, and 95% of what they write is absolute filth. Non-derogatory, but filth. That's just not what I'm really interested in writing. I will imply it if I think it actually adds value to what I'm doing, but I think it's very rare that that does occur, so yeah, just it's happening off screen. Anyway, this isn't about my writing. I'm literally like crying from laughter earlier. Oh my god. Not about my writing. I am very sorry. I guess, I mean, the problem is, right, I've already said I'm never gonna quit VTubing, so the only time that I think that I would be like, you know, oh, yeah, here's where I used to be, would be if I quit VTubing, but since I'm never gonna quit, then we're kinda stuck. Crazy character development can and will happen during the fade to black scenes. Well, they can have that character development on their own. They can have that character development, and they can just come and tell me later about whatever that development was. Here's the thing about it's not every writer's experience, but it is a decent chunk of writer's experience. You don't write the characters. The characters do whatever the hell they want. They control their own lives, and you just kind of have to write that down. You happen to write the only 150 shows. I don't know. Okay. Let me admit something right now. I get really pissed off at two of my characters in particular because they are not modest. They are not normal. They're beyond normal. They are annoying as fuck. And they appear in my brain and they're like, hey, wanna know some stuff? And I feel like I have to do the mental equivalent of like beating them with sticks. And then they don't give me a choice, and I just learn the knowledge anyway. You're talking like them. Those Trolls of Fury's repressed docs. Scary. That's scary. Both of the characters I'm talking about are yandere as well, so this is quite a no! I am fully of the belief that OCs are, well, man, if OC is a reflection of the writer, I have some problems because I have over 150 of them that are all very, well, not all very different, some are similar, but there is a whole spectrum of personalities and traits there, and if all of them are a reflection of me, yeah, I've got some issues. I've got a lot of personalities in here. So yeah, no. I don't believe it. Anyway. This... You should play 1000 Resist, by the way. I have looked at it. I think I added it to my wish list. When I scrolled through the Steam description, I thought it looked intriguing. What is the gender ratio among your OCs? Probably like 7 to 1 to 2. Female, non-binary, male. And the big pale shirtless man says, "You alone? You can confidently say you aren't." I mean, I'm not alone, cause my family is in the house. There's one very— oh no! Okay, I'll keep that in mind. Why? Why must they needle? Anyway. For the record, like... I guess... would I be more willing to say stuff about my OCs off stream? I don't know. I got shy about them. Obviously some of them I have had since like 2012, so whatever. Enough about my OCs. We're going to read this. It's in the Dread section. It's called Hell Screen. It's not very short. I think this might take a while. Although it's kind of separated into... oh my god, this is how you know I was raised in some kind of like church school. It's written in like verses? Psalms? Like there are like 4 paragraphs and then there's like a little like header with a number. Not like any of them. It is! Oh, like like not having a phobia of needles literally locks me out of like so much Guru content. Like anything medical related is such a minefield, and obviously it is like so common for needles to be used in like drugging scenes and stuff as well. I miss the days of chloroform rags, I guess. But it's not as compelling from a horror angle. So, whatever. Yeah, no, I'm mad about it too, trust me. Anyway, I'm gonna read. We're gonna read. I'll see how far I get. Since it is separated, if... oh god, I've been chatting for 40 minutes. Okay. I'll try and read for like... oh no. I'll reach halfway and then I'll see how long it's been. Yeah, I mean, conceptually, it can do a lot. It just, unfortunately for me, it's just, yeah, sorry. No, it's, I don't blame you. I'm just unfortunately quite sensitive to stuff about that. But yeah, makes me mad. I wish I wasn't. The implications! The vibes! Anyway. I don't have the right sense. No, don't worry. I wouldn't wish this phobia on anyone. It's honestly a pain in the ass. At least a phobia of something like snakes. You can avoid I've never seen a snake in my life, other than when I specifically went out to seek a snake in an enclosure. Have phobia to a snake. Anyway, we'll begin reading. This is probably not going to be light reading. This is in the dread section. This is probably going to be something. I just imagine that one source scene. I get it. So, if anyone needs to go get some rest, something to eat, something to drink, please do feel free. If you do end up falling asleep, there shouldn't be any loud noises to wake you up in this stream, so do feel free to rest. I'll not be responding to chat until I've finished either halfway or all the way to the end, but feel free to keep on talking amongst yourselves, commenting on the whatever's going on in the story. Please let me know if there are any audio issues, if I need to adjust the audio at any time. I can still see chat, I just won't respond to it until after. I'm also just going to take a quick drink. Where's my water? Okay, I've been talking for 40 minutes already. Right. Let's go. Hell Screen. I am certain there has never been anyone like our great Lord of Horikawa, and I doubt there will be another. In a dream before his lordship was born, her maternal ladyship saw the awesomely armed guardian deity of the West, or so people say. In any case, his lordship seemed to have innate qualities that distinguished him from ordinary human beings. And because of this, his accomplishments never cease to amaze us. You need only glance at his mansion in the capital's Horikawa district to sense the boldness of its conception. Its, how shall I put it? Its grandeur, its heroic scale are beyond the reach of our mediocre minds. Some have questioned the wisdom of his lordship's undertaking such a project, comparing him to China's first emperor, whose subjects were forced to build the Great Wall, or to Sui Emperor Yang, who made his people erect lofty palaces. But such critics might be likened to the proverbial blind men who described the elephant according only to the parts they could feel. It was never his lordship's intention to speak splendour and glory for himself alone. He was always a man of great magnanimity, who shared his joys with the wider world, so to speak, and kept in mind even the lowliest of his subjects. Surely this is why he was left unscathed by his encounter with that midnight procession of goblins so often seen at the lonely intersection of Nijo Omiya in the capital. It is also why, when rumour had it that the ghost of Toru, minister of the left, was appearing night after night at the site of his ruined mansion by the river at Higashi Sanjo. You must know it, where the minster had recreated the famous seascape of Shiogama in his garden. It took only a simple rebuke from his lordship to make the spirit vanish. In the face of such resplendent majesty, no wonder all residents of the capital, young and old, men and women, revered his lordship as the reincarnation of the Buddha. One time, it is said, his lordship was returning from a plum blossom banquet at the palace when the ox pulling his carriage broke loose and injured an old man who happened to be passing by. The odd fellow knelt and clasped his hands in prayerful thanks for having been caught on the horns of his lordship's own ox. So many stories about his lordship had been handed down. His Imperial Majesty himself once presented his lordship with 30 pure white horses on the occasion of a New Year's banquet. Another time, when construction of the Nagara Bridge seemed to be running counter to the will of the local deity, his lordship offered up a favourite boy attendant as human sacrifice to be buried at the foot of the pillar. And then there was the time when, to have a growth cut from his thigh, he summoned the Chinese monk who had brought the art of surgery to our country. Oh, there's no end to the tales. For sheer horror, though, none of them measures up to the story of the screen depicting scenes of hell, which is now a prized family heirloom. Even his lordship, normally so imperturbable, was horrified by what happened, and those of us who waited upon him, well, it goes without saying that we were shocked out of our minds. I myself had served as one of his lordship's men for a full 20 years, but what I witnessed then was more terrible than anything I had ever, or have ever, experienced. In order to tell you the story of the hell screen, however, I must first tell you about the painter who created it. His name was Yoshihide. I suspect that even now there are ladies and gentlemen who would recognize the name Yoshihide. He was famous back then as the famous painter in the land. He was famous back then as the greatest painter in the land, but when he had reached the age of perhaps 50, and he looked like nothing more than a thoroughly unpleasant little old man, all skin and bones. He dressed normally enough for his appearances at his lordship's mansion, in a reddish-brown, broad-sleeved silk robe, and a tall black hat with a soft bend to the right. But as a person, he was anything but normal. You could see he had a mean streak, and his lips, unnaturally red for such an old man, gave a disturbing, bestial impression. Some people said that the redness came from moistening his paintbrush with his lips, but I wonder about that. Crueler tongues used to say he looked and moved like a monkey, and they went so far as to give Yoshihide the nickname Monkeyhide. That nickname reminds me of a particular episode. Yoshihide had a daughter, his only child, a sweet, lovely girl of 15, utterly unlike her father. She had been taken into the Horikawa mansion as a junior lady-in-waiting for his lordship's own daughter, the young mistress. Perhaps because she had lost her mother at a tender age, she had an unusually mature and deeply sympathetic nature, and a cleverness beyond her years. And everyone from her ladyship on down loved the girl for her quickness to notice every other's needs. Around that time, someone from the province of Tamba presented his lordship with a tame monkey, and his lordship's son, the young master, who was then at the height of his boyish naughtiness, decided to name it Yoshihide. The monkey was a funny-looking little creature as it was, but capping it with that name gave everyone in the household a hearty laugh. No, if only they had been satisfied just to laugh. But whatever the monkey did, whether climbing to the top of a garden pine or soiling the mats of a staff member's rooms, people would find a reason to torment it, and always with a shout of Yoshihide. Then one day, as Yoshihide's daughter was gliding down a long outdoor corridor to deliver a note gaily knotted on a branch of red winter plum, the monkey Yoshihide darted in through the sliding door at the far end, in full flight from something. The animal was running with a limp, and seemed unable to escape up a post, as it often did when frightened. Then who should appear chasing after it but the young master, brandishing a switch, and shouting, "Come back here, you tangerine thief! Come back here!" Yoshihide's daughter drew up short at the sight, and the monkey clung to her skirts with a pitiful cry. This must have aroused her compassion, for, still holding the plum branch in one hand, she swept the monkey up in the soft folds of her lavender sleeve. Then, giving a little bow to the young master, she said with cool clarity, "Forgive me for interfering, my young lord, but he is just an animal. Please pardon him." Temper still up from the chase, the young master scowled and stamped his foot several times. "Why are you protecting him?" he demanded. "He stole my tangerine." "He is just an animal," she repeated. "He doesn't know any better." And then, smiling sadly, she added, "His name is Yoshihide, after all, I can't just stand by and watch my father being punished. This bold stroke was apparently enough to break the young master's will. "All right then," he said with obvious reluctance. "If you're pleading for your father's life, I'll let him off this time." The young master flung his switch into the garden and stalked back out through the sliding door. After this incident, Yoshihide's daughter and the little monkey grew close. The girl had a golden bell that her young mistress had given her, which she hung from the monkey's neck on a pretty crimson cord, and he, for his part, would almost never leave her side. Once, when she was in bed with a cold, the monkey spent hours by her pillow, biting its nails, and I swear it had a worried look on its face. People stopped teasing the monkey after that, strangely enough. In fact, they began treating it with a special kindness, until even the young master would occasionally throw it a persimmon or a chestnut, and I heard he once flew into a rage when one of the samurai kicked the animal. Soon after that, his lordship himself ordered the girl to appear before him with the monkey in her arms. All because, in hearing about the young master's tantrum, I am told, he naturally also heard about how the girl had come to care for the monkey. "I admire your filial behaviour," his lordship said. "Here, take this." And he presented her with a fine scarlet underrobe. They tell me that his lordship was especially pleased when the monkey, imitating the girl's expression of gratitude, bowed low before him, holding the robe aloft. And so his lordship's partiality for the girl was born entirely from his wish to commend her filial devotion to her father, and not, as rumour had it, from any physical attraction he might have felt for her. Not that such suspicions were entirely groundless, but there will be time for me to tell you about that later. For now, suffice it to say that his lordship was not the sort of person to lavish his affections on the daughter of a mere painter, however beautiful she might be. Well, then, having been singled out for praise this way, Yoshihide's daughter withdrew from his lordship's presence, but she knew how to avoid provoking the envy of the household's other, less modest ladies-in-waiting. Indeed, people grew fonder than ever of her and the monkey, and the young mistress almost never let them leave her side, even bringing them with her in her ox-drawn carriage when she went to observe shrine rituals and the like. But enough about the girl for now. Let me continue with my story of her father, Yoshihide. As I have said, the monkey Yoshihide quickly became everyone's little darling, but Yoshihide himself remained an object of universal scorn, reviled as Monkey Hide by everyone behind his back. And not only in the Horikawa mansion. Even such an eminent Buddhist prelate as the abbot of Yokawa hated Yoshihide so much that if the very mention of his name was enough to make him turn purple as if he had seen a devil. Some said this was also because Yoshihide had drawn a caricature ridiculing certain aspects of the abbot's behaviour, but this was merely a rumour that circulated among the lower classes, and as such can hardly be credited. In any case, Yoshihide's reputation was so bad that anyone you asked would have told you the same thing. If there were those who spoke kindly of Yoshihide, they were either a handful of the Brotherhood of Painters, or else people who knew his work, but not the man himself. His appearance was not the only thing that people hated about Yoshihide. In fact, he had many evil traits that repelled them even more, and for which he had only himself to blame. For one thing, Yoshihide was a terrible miser. He was harsh in his dealings with people, he had no shame, he was lazy and greedy. But worst of all, he was insolent and arrogant. He never let you forget that he was the greatest painter in all the land. Nor was his arrogance limited to painting. He could not be satisfied till he displayed his contempt for every custom and convention that ordinary people practiced. A man who was his apprentice for many years once told me this story. Yoshihide was out one day in the mansion of a certain gentleman when the celebrated shamaness of Cypress Enclosure was there, undergoing spirit possession. The woman delivered a horrifying message from the spirit, but Yoshihide was unimpressed. He took up a handy ink brush and did a detailed sketch of her wild expression, as if he viewed spirit possession as mere trickery. No wonder, then, that such a man would commit acts of sacrilege in his work. In painting the lovely goddess Kishoten, he used the face of a common harlot, and to portray the mighty flame-draped deity Fudo, his model was a criminal released to do chores in the magistrate's office. If you tried to warn him that he was flirting with danger, he would respond with feigned innocence. "I'm the one who painted them, after all," he would say. "Are you trying to tell me that my own Buddhas and gods are going to punish me?" Even his apprentices were shocked by this. I myself knew several of them who, fearing for their own punishment in the afterlife, wasted no time in leaving his employ. The man's arrogance simply knew no bounds. He was convinced that he was the greatest human being under heaven. It goes without saying that Yoshihide lorded it over the other painters of his time. True, his brushwork and colours were utterly different from theirs, and so the many painters with whom he was on bad terms tended to speak of him as a charlatan. They rhapsodized over the work of old masters such as Kawanari or Kanaoka. On moonlight nights you could actually smell the plum blossoms painted on that wooden door, or you could actually hear the courtier on that screen playing his flute. But all they had to say about Yoshihide's work was how eerie and unsettling they found it. Take his 5 levels of rebirth on the Ryuji Temple Gate, for example. When I passed the gate late at night, one said, I could hear the dying celestials sighing and sobbing. That's nothing, another claimed. I could smell the flesh of the dead rotting. And how about the portraits of the household's ladies-in-waiting that his lordship ordered from Yoshihide? Every single woman he painted fell ill and died within 3 years. It was as if he had snatched their very souls from them. According to one of his harshest critics, this was the final proof that Yoshihide practiced the devil's art. But Yoshihide was so perverse, as I've said, that remarks like this only filled him with pride. When his lordship joked to him one time, "For you, it seems, the uglier the better," old Yoshihide's far too red lips spread into an eerie grin, and he replied imperiously, "Yes, my lord, it's true. Other painters are such mediocrities. They cannot appreciate the beauty of ugliness." I must say, greatest painter in the land or not, it was incredible that he could spout such self-congratulatory nonsense in his lordship's presence. No wonder his apprentices called him Chira Eiju behind his back. You know, Chira Eiju, the long-nosed goblin who crossed over from China long ago to spread the sin of arrogance. But still, even Yoshihide, in all his incredible perversity, yes, even Yoshihide displayed human tenderness when it came to one thing. By this, I mean that Yoshihide was truly mad about his only daughter, the young lady in waiting. The girl was, as I said before, a wonderfully kind-hearted young creature, deeply devoted to her father, and his love for her was no less strong than hers for him. I gather that he provided for her every need, every robe, every hair ornament, without the slightest objection. Don't you find this incredible for a man who has never made a single contribution to a temple? Yoshihide's love for his daughter, however, remained just that. Love. It never occurred to him that he should be trying to find her a good husband someday. Far from it. He was not above hiring street thugs to beat up anyone who might make improper advances to her. So even when his lordship honoured her with the position of junior lady-in-waiting in his own household, Yoshihide was far from happy about it. and for a while he always wore a sour expression whenever he was in his lordship's presence. I have no doubt that people who witnessed this display were the ones who began speculating that his lordship had been attracted to the girl's beauty when he ordered her into service, despite her father's objections. Such rumours were entirely false, of course. It was nothing but Yoshihide's obsessive love for his daughter that kept him wishing to have her step down from service, that is certain. I remember the time his lordship ordered Yoshihide to do a painting of Monju as a child, and Yoshihide pleased him greatly with a marvellous work that used one of his lordship's own boy favourites as a model. "You can have anything you want as your reward," said his lordship. "Anything at all." Yoshihide should have been awestruck to hear such praise from his lordship's own lips, and he did in fact prostrate himself in thanks before him. But can you imagine what he asked? "If it please your lordship, I beg you to return my daughter to her former lowly state." The impudence of the man! This was no ordinary household after all. No matter how much he loved his daughter, to beg for her release from service in a privileged proximity to the great Lord of Horikawa himself, where in the world does one find such audacity? Not even a man as grandly magnanimous as his lordship could help feeling some small annoyance at such a request, as was evident from the way he stared at Yoshihide for a while in silence. Presently he spoke. "That will not happen," he said, all but spitting out the words, and he abruptly withdrew. This was not the first, nor the last such incident. I think there might have been 4 or 5 in all, and with each repetition, it now seems to me, his lordship gazed on Yoshihide with increasing coldness. The girl, for her part, seemed to fear for her father's welfare. Often she could be seen sobbing quietly to herself in her room, teeth clamped on her sleeve. All this only reinforced the rumour that his lordship was enamoured of the girl. People also said that the command to paint the screen had something to do with her rejection of his lordship's advances, but that, of course, could not be so. As I see it, it was entirely out of pity for the girl's situation that his lordship refused to let her go. I am certain he believed, with great generosity, that she would be far better off if he were to keep her in his mansion and enable her to live without care than if he sent her back to her hard-headed old father. That he was partial to her, of course, there could be no doubt. She was such a sweet-tempered young thing. But to assert that he took his lustful pleasure with her is a view that springs from twisted reasoning. No, I would have to call it a groundless falsehood. At any rate, owing to these matters regarding his daughter, this was a period when Yoshihide was in great disfavour with his lordship. Then, suddenly one day, for whatever reason, his lordship summoned Yoshihide and ordered him to paint a folding screen portraying scenes from the 8 Buddhist hells. Oh, that screen! I can almost see its terrifying images of hell before me now. Other artists painted what they called images of hell, but their compositions were nothing like Yoshihide's. He had the 10 kings of hell and their minions over in one small corner, and everything else, the entire screen, was enveloped in a firestorm so terrible you thought the swirling flames were going to melt the mountains of sabres and the forest of swords. Aside from the vaguely Chinese costumes of the Judges of the Dark, with their swatches of yellow and indigo, all you saw was the searing colour of flames, and, dancing wildly among them, black smoke clouds of hurled India ink and flying sparks of blown-on gold dust. These alone were enough to shock and amaze any viewer, but the sinners writhing in the hellfire of Yoshihide's powerful brush had nothing in common with those to be seen in ordinary pictures of hell. For Yoshihide had included sinners from all stations in life, from the most brilliant luminary of His Majesty's exalted circle to the basest beggar and outcast. a courtier in magnificent ceremonial vestments, a nubile lady-in-waiting in 5-layer robed, a rosary-clutching priest intoning the holy name of Amida, a samurai student on high wooden clogs, an aristocratic little girl in a simple shift, a yin-yang diviner swishing his paper wand through the air. I could never name them all. But there they were, human beings of every kind, inundated by smoke and flame, tormented by wardens of hell with their heads of bulls and horses, and driven in all directions like autumn leaves scattering before a great wind. "No, look at that one," you would say, "the one with her hair all tangled up in a forked lance, and her arms and legs drawn in tighter than a spider's. Could she be one of those shrine maidens who performs for the gods? And oh, that fellow there, hanging upside down like a bat, his breast pierced by a short lance. Surely he is supposed to be a novice provincial governor." And the kinds of torture were as numberless as the sinners themselves. Flogging with an iron scourge, crushing under a gigantic rock, pecking by a monstrous bird, grinding in the jaws of a poisonous serpent. But surely the most horrifying image of all was that of a carriage plummeting through space. As it fell, it grazed the upper boughs of the sword tree, where clumps of corpses were skewered on fang-like branches. Blasts of hell wind swept up the carriage curtains to reveal a court lady so gorgeously apparelled that she might have been one of His Imperious Majesty's own consorts or intimates, her straight black hip-length hair flying upwards in the flames, the full whiteness of her throat laid bare as she writhed in agony. Every detail of the woman's form and the blazing carriage filled the viewer with the appalling sense of the hideous torments to be found in the hell of searing heat. It felt, how can I put it, as though the sheer horror of the entire screen were concentrated in this one figure. It had been executed with such inspired workmanship, you'd think that all who saw it could hear the woman's dreadful screams. Oh yes, this was it. For the sake of painting this one image, the terrible event occurred. Otherwise, how could even the great Yoshihide have painted hell's torments so vividly? It was his cruel fate to lose his life in exchange for completing the screen. In a sense, the hell in his painting was the hell into which Yoshihide himself, the greatest painter in the realm, was doomed to one day to fall. I'm afraid that, in my haste to speak of the screen with its unusual images of hell, I may have reversed the order of my story. Now let me continue with the part about Yoshihide when he received his lordship's command to do a painting of hell. For nearly 6 months after the commission, Yoshihide poured all his energy into the screen, never once calling it his lordship's residence. Don't you find it strange that such a doting father should abandon all thought of seeing his daughter once he had started on a painting? According to the apprentice I mentioned earlier, Yoshihide always approached his work like a man possessed by a fox spirit. In fact, people used to say that the only reason Yoshihide was able to make such a name for himself in art was that he had pledged his soul to one of the great gods of fortune. What proved it was that if you peeked in on him while he was painting, you could see shadowy fox spirits swarming all around him. What this means, I suspect, is that, once he picked up his brush, Yoshihide thought of nothing else but completing the painting before him. He would spend all day and night shut up in his studio out of sight. His concentration seems to have been especially intense when he was working on this particular screen with his images of hell. This is not merely to say that he would keep up the lattice shutters pulled down and spend all day by the tripod oil lamp, mixing secret combinations of paint or posing his apprentices in various costumes for him to sketch. No, that was normal behaviour for the working Yoshihide, even before the screen. Remember, This was a man who, when he was painting his 5 levels of rebirth on Ryugaiji Temple Gate, went out specially to inspect a corpse lying on the roadside, the kind of sight from which any ordinary person would recoil, and spent hours sitting before it, sketching its rotting face and limbs without missing a hair. I don't blame you then, if you are among those who cannot imagine what I mean when I say that this concentration during his work on the hell screen was especially intense. I haven't time now to explain this in detail, but I can at least tell you the most important things. One day, an apprentice of Yoshihide's, the one I've mentioned a few times already, was busy dissolving pigments when the master suddenly said to him, "I'm planning to take a nap, but I don't know. I've been having bad dreams lately." There was nothing strange about this, so the apprentice merely answered, "I see, master," and continued with his work. Yoshihide, however, was not his usual self. Somewhat hesitantly, and with a doleful look on his face, he made a surprising request. "I want you to sit and work beside me while I sleep." The apprentice thought it rather odd that his master should be worrying about dreams, but it was a simple enough request, and he promptly agreed to it. "All right then," Yoshihide said, still looking worried. "Come inside right away." He hesitated, and when the other apprentices arrive, he added, "Don't let any of them in where I am sleeping." Inside meant the room where the master actually did his painting, and as usual on this day, the apprentice told me, its doors and windows were shut as tightly as at night. In the dull glow of an oil lamp, its panels arranged in a semicircle, stood the large folding screen, which was still only sketched out in charcoal. Yoshihide lay down with his head pillowed on his forearm, and slipped into the deep sleep of an utterly exhausted man. Hardly any time had gone by, however, when the apprentice began to hear a sound that he had no way of describing. It was a voice, he told me, but a strange and eerie one. At first, it was just a sound, but soon, in snatches, the voice began to form words that came to him as if underwater, like the muffled cries of a drowning man. "What?" the voice said. "You want me to come with you? Where? Where are you taking me? To hell, you say? To the hell of searing heat, you say? Who are you, damn you? Who can you be but—" The apprentice, dissolving pigments, felt his hands stop of their own accord. He peered fearfully through the gloom at his master's face. Not only had the furrowed skin gone stark white, but fat beads of sweat oozed from it, and the dry-lipped, snaggle-toothed mouth strained wide open as if gasping for breath. The youth saw something moving in his master's mouth with dizzying speed, like an object being yanked by a cord. But then, imagine, he realized the thing was Yoshihide's tongue. The fragmented speech had been coming through from that tongue of his. Who could it be but you? Damn it! It is you! I thought so. What's that? You've come to show me the way there? You want me to follow you? To hell! My daughter is waiting for me in hell! The apprentice told me that an uncanny feeling overcame him at that point. His eyes seemed to make out vague, misshapen shadows that slid over the surface of the screen and fluttered down upon the two of them. Naturally, he immediately reached over and shook Yoshihide as hard as he could. But rather than waking, the master, in a dreamlike state, went on talking to himself and showed no sign of regaining consciousness. Desperate now, the apprentice grabbed the jar for washing brushes and splashed all of its water into Yoshihide's face. "I'm waiting for you," Yoshihide was saying, "so hurry and get into the cart. Come along to hell." But the moment the water hit him, his words turned to a strangled moan. At last he opened his eyes, and he sprang up more wildly than if he had been jabbed with a needle. But the misshapen creatures must have been with him still, for he stared into space, with mouth agape and with terrified eyes. At length he returned to himself and, without a hint of gratitude, barked at the poor apprentice. "I'm all right now. Get out of here." The apprentice knew he would be scolded if he resisted his master at a time like this, so he hurried out of the room, but he told me that when he saw the sunlight again, he felt as relieved as if he were waking from his own nightmare. This was by no means Yoshihide at his worst, however. A month later he called another apprentice into the inner room. The young man found Yoshihide standing in the dim light of the oil lamp, biting the end of his paintbrush. Without a moment's hesitation, Yoshihide turned to him and said, "Sorry, but I want you to get naked again." The master had ordered such things in the past, so the apprentice quickly stripped off his clothes. But now Yoshihide said with a strange scowl, "I want to see a person in chains, so do what I tell you. Sorry about this, but it will just take a little while." Yoshihide could mouth apologetic phrases, but he issued his cold commands without the least show of sympathy. This particular apprentice was a well-built lad, who looked more suited to wielding a sword than a paintbrush, but even he must have been shocked by what happened. "I figured the master had gone crazy and was going to kill me," he told people again and again for long afterwards. Yoshihide was apparently annoyed by the young man's slow preparations. Instead of waiting, he dragged out a narrow iron chain from heaven knows where, and all but pounced on the apprentice's back, wrenching the man's arms behind him and winding him in the chain. Then he gave the end of the chain a cruel yank, and sent the young man crashing down on the floor. The apprentice lay there like a keg of sake that someone had knocked over. Legs and arms mercilessly contorted, he could move only his head. And with the chain cutting off the circulation of his blood, his skin became red and swollen, face, torso, everywhere. Yoshihide, though, was apparently not the least bit concerned to see him like this. He circled this sake keg of a body, observing it from every angle and drawing sketch after sketch. I am certain that, without my spelling it out, you can imagine what torture this must have been for the poor apprentice. If nothing had interrupted it, the young man's ordeal would almost surely have lasted even longer. But fortunately, or perhaps unfortunately, a narrow, winding streak of black oil, or so it seemed to flow from behind a large jar in the corner of the room. At first it moved slowly, like a thick liquid, but then it began to slide along the floor more smoothly, glinting in the darkness until it was almost touching the apprentice's nose. He took a good look at it, gasped and screamed, "A snake! A snake!" The way he described the moment to me, he felt as if every drop of blood in his body would freeze, which I can well understand, for in fact the snake's cold tongue was about to touch the flesh of his neck where the chain was biting. Even Yoshihide, for all his perversity, must have felt a rush of horror at this unforeseen occurrence. Flinging his brush down, he bent and gripped the snake by the tail, dangling it upside down. The snake raised its head and began to coil upwards around its own body, but it could not reach Yoshihide's hand. "You cost me a good brushstroke, damn you," he growled at the snake, flinging it into the corner jar. Then, with obvious reluctance, he loosened the chains that bound the apprentice's body. In fact, loosening the chains was as far as he was willing to go. To the youth himself he spared not a word of sympathy. I suspect he was more enraged at having botched a single brushstroke than concerned that his apprentice might have been bitten by a snake. I heard afterwards that he had been keeping the snake to sketch from. I imagine that what little you have heard is good enough for you to grasp the fanatic intensity with which Yoshihide approached his work. But let me give you one last terrible example concerning a young apprentice, no more than 13 or 14 years old, who could have lost his life for the hell screen. It happened one night when the boy, whose skin was fair as a girl's, was called into the master's studio. There he found Yoshihide by the tripod lamp, balancing a piece of raw meat on his palm and feeding it to a bird the likes of which he had never seen before. The bird was the size of a cat, and in fact, with its 2 feather tufts sticking out from its head-like ears and its big, round, amber-coloured eyes, it did look very much like a cat. Yoshihide was a man who simply hated to have anyone pry into his business, and the snake I told you about was one such case. He would never let his apprentices know what kinds of things he had in his studio. Depending on the subject he happened to be painting at the time, he might have had a human skull perched on his table, or rows of silver bowls and gold-lacquered stands. You never knew, and his helpers told me they had no idea where he kept such things when he was not using them. This was surely one reason for the rumour that Yoshihide was the beneficiary of miraculous aid from a god of fortune. Well, then, the young apprentice, assuming that the strange bird on the table was a model Yoshihide needed for the hell screen, he knelt before the painter and asked in all humility, "How can I help you, master?" Almost as if he had not heard the boy speak, Yoshihide licked his red lips and jerked his chin towards the bird. "Not bad, eh? Look how tame it is." "Please tell me, master, what is it? I have never seen anything like it before," the boy said, keeping his wary gaze fixed on the cat-like bird with ears. "What? Never seen anything like it?" Yoshihide responded with his familiar scornful laugh. "That's what you get for growing up in the capital. It's a bird, a horned owl. A hunter brought it to me a few days ago from Mount Kurama. Only, you don't usually find them so tame." As he spoke, Yoshihide slowly raised his hand and gave a soft upward stroke to the feathers of the owl's back, just as the bird finished swallowing the chunk of meat. Instantly, the bird emitted a shriek and leapt from the tabletop, aiming its outstretched talons at the apprentice's face. Had the boy not shot his arm out to protect himself, I have no doubt that he would have ended up with more than a gash or 2 on his face. He cried out and shook his sleeve in an attempt to sweep the bird away, which only added to the fury of the attack. Beak clattering, the owl came in for another thrust. Disregarding Yoshihide's presence, the apprentice ran wildly around the cramped room, now standing to defend himself, now crouching to drive the bird away. The monster, of course, stuck with him, flying up when he stood up and down when he crouched down, and using any opening to go straight for his eyes. With each lunge came a tremendous flapping of wings that filled the boy with dread. He felt so lost, he said later, that the familiar studio seemed like a haunted valley deep in the mountains, with the smell of rotting leaves, the spray of a waterfall, the sour fumes of fruit stashed away by a monkey, even the dim glow of the master's oil lamp on its tripod looked to him like a misty moonlight in the hills. Being attacked by the owl, however, was not what frightened the lad. What really made his flesh crawl was the way the master Yoshihide followed the commotion with his cold stare, taking his time to spread out a piece of paper, lick his brush, and then set about capturing the terrible image of a delicate boy being tormented by a hideous bird. At the sight, the apprentice was overcome by an inexpressible terror. For a time, he says, he even thought his master might kill him. I'm going to pause there. That is halfway through. That is one of the longer short stories. He doesn't need a motive. I will say, when I was reading out the description of the people in the painting of hell, I was like, wow, this really is kind of like almost a commentary on, you know, how most of the time a lot of historical famous pieces of art of hell is just like, you know, criminals and stuff. it was very rare for any paintings, if any pieces of art were made that actually included like people of all social classes. You know, that wasn't approved of, that wasn't kept. That was a bad taste to do. So yeah, I will finish the rest of Hellscreen next time, because that took, I think, about either 40-35 minutes to read halfway, so we will finish the story of Yoshihide and his lordship. When you write an entire book of dissing a dude but still admit he's yeah, the narrator is quite interesting in this. I don't trust him. Obviously he has a very severe bias towards his lordship, so I'd be curious on kind of like what is the narrator's stake in this? Why is this story being told, kind of thing. But yeah, when I was reading through last time the description about the author. Also, hello Gravity. Sorry I didn't say hello. You came in. Hi. When I was reading about what the editors of this book wrote about the author, apparently it is a tale based on a Japanese classic. So I don't know what Japanese classic is. Also, his continued insistence his lordship wasn't attracted to Yoshihide's daughter. Yeah, I was wondering where that was going when that was first mentioned. Trust me, bro. Trust me, bro. His lordship is not attracted to the artist's daughter. This is not sexual. Your insistence concerns me. Centuries old cope, yeah. Yeah, his lordship is presented in a way that's just too... my lordship could never do anything wrong. My lordship is perfect and has never had a sinful thought in his life. What do you mean? My lordship is forgiving even towards those disgusting peasants outside. Like, alright, buddy. I don't know what that emoji is. Clicking on it did not help. Clicking on it just made a bunch of stuff come up there. I don't know what it is. But yeah, we'll see what happens. It's a blue person eating spaghetti. Oh, so it is. I guess. Oh yeah, it's like spaghetti and meatballs. Okay. Sorry, I had to lean like right into the screen to try and make out what that was. Yeah, YouTube emoji. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the cat in a box emoji. The cat in a box emoji. Perfect. No notes. That is where a cat is supposed to be. But yeah, some of them are just kind of sure. I am emotion holding a stopwatch. Is that a can of Spam? It is. Why is... What? Okay. Mad about being spam. Yeah, no, YouTube's emote situation is definitely strange. Too corporate? I just feel like they don't even know what they're doing. Never mind. Do you ever feel like a can of spam? Is a Greendale human being sketch taken too far? I do not know what the Greendale human being sketch is. This keeps happening to me. There will never be an end to the amount of times people say, oh, do you know film, book, etc. and me being like, no. My singing teacher did it to me, literally on Monday. He was like, oh, this is like, have you ever seen the film? And he named a film, I can't even remember what it was called, and then I was like, no, and he was like, okay, then you wouldn't get it. I'm like, okay. Sorry for not having seen a film. There's a show called Community where a community college, a focus group, a school mascot that could not be offensive to anyone and ended up being horrific. Oh god. I feel like I have heard of Community. I feel like I have heard of just the name, not anything about it. Maybe someone reblogged a GIF set on Tumblr or something. Tends to be how I learn about the existence of shows. Anyway, I'm probably gonna head off. It was drawing super. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it would have been. That was like the height of GIF sets and stuff. God. Yeah, I'm gonna head off. Next stream is gonna be that new outfit debut. Technically my 5-year anniversary. Can't believe I'm turning 5 years old. Let's go. I briefly mentioned it on Tumblr. I am thinking about doing a karaoke segment after revealing the outfit. I don't really have anything else planned. I better really like draw out showing the outfit. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how long. We'll see how long I stream for. I mean, I probably can just yap for like 1,000,000 hours. I am prone to do so. But yeah, thank you very much for coming. Yeah, karaoke segment. I've only got one song in mind so far, but it's fine. Can you do a karaoke segment with one song? Yeah, maybe. But yeah, until Thursday, get something to eat, get something to drink, get some rest. Yapping is remote. I'm glad people find it so. I'm glad people enjoy my yapping content. I know it's not for everyone, but that's okay. Yeah, ta-ta for now. That's been a while. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for coming, everyone. Let me pause where's my music? There we go. Alright. Good night. Onyasumi. Good night.